Welcome everyone to the Way Out West YouTube channel. This is the last interview for 2023. We'll have a little break and be back in late January. Today I get to interview Steve Boyd. Steve Boyd and Reverie will be our Christmas breakup show this coming Sunday, 17th of December, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Steve's got a fantastic backstory, coming over from Dundee, Scotland and setting seamlessly into the Melbourne music scene. He tells some great stories and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this interview. Please hit the subscribe and like button. It really helps me out. I'm trying to get my subscribers up to 100, then we can all celebrate. So sit back and enjoy the interview. If you celebrate Christmas or if you call it the holidays, whatever you want to do, have a great one. And we hope to see you Sunday, 2 p.m. at Way Out West for Steve Boyd and Reverie. See you soon and rock on, my friends. Got a few questions we might start. So, Steve, can you tell us about growing up in Scotland? I believe on the east coast. Where exactly was that? And I'm assuming that music would have been a big part of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, East Coast, Dundee, which is there right on the East Coast. If you, it's about an hour and I don't know, just over an hour from Edinburgh. So if you cross the Forth Road Bridge outside of or leaving Edinburgh, you go through Fife, and then once you've gone through Fife, you come to Tay, the River Tay, and then you cross that into Dundee. And then right on the East Coast after Dundee, you've got Forther and all sorts of different places, all the way up to Aberdeen and further.
Cool. I know I do have a connection with Scotland. My first wife was from Glasgow, and my brother-in-law Jimmy, he said to me when Linda and I got divorced, he said, well, you might be divorcing my sister, but you're fucking not divorcing me. So we're still great mates. But what I do remember about those, going to the family home, especially around Hogmanay, that everyone was singing. It was a great family time.
Absolutely. That's very much the environment and the culture that I grew up in and around as well, very much so. Yeah, Hogmanay goes right with saying, but it was always singing around our house. My dad was a great singer and a bit of an amateur singer back in his day, and Mum loved the song too, and lots of the friends and our other family members also. So it was that classic Celtic tradition of everyone gets a song that happened all the time, and also music playing a lot, and lots of different sorts of music, some old school soul and blues and jazz, certainly Louis Armstrong and all the usual examples of that era, but also Sinatra and some of the crooners as well. So my dad had pretty, I suppose, Catholic taste in music, and he was also a Catholic as well. So there you go. But also some Celtic music too. And it wasn't the tacky sort of shortbread tin Celtic music. It was generally pretty tasteful. Like there were Dubliners records that he would play and things like that as well. So yeah, good days, really fond memories. And also music was very much part of my upbringing. I started buying 45s when I was about 10 years old, I think. Probably quite influenced by my older brother, like a lot of young chaps are growing up. And probably for me, it was more the post-punk kind of era. But certainly from him, I was introduced to some of the classic UK punk bands, obviously the Pistols and the Damned and the Clash. I was a huge fan of, and I liked the Clash probably, because I'm talking very young, early teens, or just before my teens even. But they're as they moved on, especially with the album London Calling, they had quite colourful influences and a wide variety of roots music influences. So there was certainly stuff, inspiration coming from rocksteady and ska and the reggae, and then they're mucking around with some funky feels and even some kind of early rap, hip hop type feels and things like that, and rockabilly and whatnot. So that, and also just reading some articles and whatnot about some of the artists that they admired and were influenced by, that sort of caused me to go and do some digging myself and do some research. And from there I found out the original artists, the original rocksteady and ska artists, and the original blues and other sorts of blues and roots artists and whatnot. And certainly ska, rocksteady, reggae. There was a massive scene for that in the UK anyway. With the West Indian immigration boom that happened from late 40s onwards, that was embedded in the UK culture, I think. Similar deal with soul. Northern soul was huge, and that was still really big when I was a kid. So all those influences, it feels like I was surrounded by them, and you just naturally absorb them. It's just part of it's part of the fiber of the culture and the environment you're growing up in.
Yeah, I agree. I love the Clash, and one of their albums, a double album, I think it is, was a bit maligned, but I really loved the album Sandinista because it had so many different styles of music on it.
Yeah, absolutely. That had some incredible styles of music on it. In fact, if I remember correctly, Rob, maybe that might have been a triple album.
No, I think you're right too.
Yeah,
Yes.
but they were maligned because they reckon they could have easily cut it down to a double album. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that was terribly underrated myself. Actually, I think the Magnificent Seven was on that album, if I remember. Yeah, pretty amazing stuff.
Correct. And so, when did you make the move to Melbourne? Was it a family thing, or did you come by yourself?
It was a family thing, yeah, because I was still in my teens. I was in my mid to late teens. I was moving into that phase. My older brother stayed. He came out later, but that's another story. And the usual story with it, the introduction of Thatcher's Britain and just the way Scotland was annihilated. Just industries just disappeared overnight with Thatcherism, and the same deal in parts of northern England and so on as well. And yeah, lots, and the privatization and everything else. Lots of people just lost their income again, just and started struggling. I remember my dad was doing all sorts of odd jobs, being a janitor here and there, and a security guard, and just dribs and drabs to try and make ends meet. But yeah, trades were just obliterated, and he had a trade. He used to work in the NCR factory when it was quite popular in Dundee, but places like that just disappeared, and it was the dawning of a new, rather grim era for the UK. So we were probably right at the tail end of that whole £10 tourist sort of movement. It was already getting quite late on in the piece, like the migrant hostels and whatnot were starting to be closed down in the early 80s. So yeah, that was my experience.
He's got a lot to answer for, that horrible person, Thatcher.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. One of the great, Scotland had such a rich history of shipbuilding too, didn't it?
That's right. Exactly. Very much so. So shipbuilding was huge. They even used to do some of that in Dundee, but of course Glasgow was renowned for it. The shipyards and whatnot. But also, textiles, wool, of course, oil. Well, don't get me started on that. We should,
We'll have a chat at the gig, mate.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And how did you, when you got to Melbourne, how did you connect with the music scene here? Was that difficult to get into it, or?
Look, that's just that was something that just happened gradually, just through meeting like-minded people, I guess. In fact, I remember bumping into someone at all places, of at Sunshine Station, I should say, of all places. It seemed a highly unlikely place back then, but he was wearing a Clash t-shirt, and that was, he may as well have, had three eyes. That was a very unusual thing to see. And I was like, hey, the Clash, and we became friends, and he introduced me to some venues and whatnot in St Kilda and other places where bands played. And I started doing that, sort of going to places underage, like a lot of people did. And the classic venue, the Crystal Ballroom, was still going. I believe that started out in the 70s or late 70s or something. And of course, Prince of Wales, the Espy, that whole scene, and then places in Fitzroy and whatnot afterwards. But yeah, I just started meeting like-minded people, and yeah, and then just gradually, because I was already mucking around in a garage band sort of sense back in Scotland with my brother and some mutual friends and whatnot, and that just continued on here when I met up with other people who had an equal passion. And yeah, it just seemed very natural, Rob. It's not anything I ever gave a great deal of thought to. It just felt like it felt like my calling, and it didn't feel right not doing it. I suppose, more to the point.
And so when did you progress on to Steve Boyd in the Preachers? When did that come about?
Well, that after like kicking around with a variety of different bands with different names and whatnot, just around the scene. And I suppose really at the time I used to think, oh, it's getting tough in the band scene, especially because the introduction of the polkas and all that stuff had happened. And the competition was greater and whatnot. But at this one particular time, I was inspired by, the Pogues, and inspired by some of the earlier Waterboys stuff and various other bands, and I always loved Celtic music, Irish and Scottish music and whatnot, and I wanted to start including some accordion and fiddle and things like that with some of these new tunes I was writing, and sort of taught myself some penny whistle and whatnot. And I remember going out with my comrade, my musical comrade at the time, Rory Boast, and we heard about some venues where there was Irish music playing. We just went and saw a few and introduced ourselves to a fiddle player called Peter O'Shea, and we got him down to lay some fiddle tracks down in these demos we did. And anyway, there's a bit of a long-winded kind of road I'm going down here, but to cut a long story short, this fiddle player said to me, hey, our singer is about to take off to America for the next year or something. We've got a pile of regular gigs. Would you be up for filling in for him? And it was like 3 sets a night. But at the time, it was like they paid really well. You got at least $300, and I was used to paying to play, basically. Not too similar to these days in some venues, but yeah, decent money, all the Guinness and jammies you could drink, a meal. I thought, I'm in. Just singing the songs you love, absolutely. So I learned up a whole pile of Irish songs, and that was really good too, because that forced me to really start digging and doing some research again, and just learning all about the richness and the wonderful diversity of Celtic music, and also how much making connections, realizing how much Celtic music influenced other musical forms. Certainly, it has a large part to play in the American story. You know, the Appalachian Mountains, you can tell how Celtic music directly affected things like bluegrass and country and so on and so forth. You know, the classic Irish and Scottish ballads and whatnot. That's, you know, very, very similar to the whole old school country tradition of balladry. And jigs and reels, very similar to bluegrass tunes and whatnot. So yeah, that was an exciting period just for me as a student, just to be inspired by something different. So from there, I thought, as I inevitably do, all right, this is great, but I'm getting a bit bored just singing classic traditional numbers all the time. So I started writing some of my own stuff. Then we formed a band called the Preachers, and that was like a sideline Irish pub type gig. But it started doing really well, and we started drawing much bigger crowds in the bands we were playing and outside of that. And then we released a CD, and it just, it gained momentum, and then it became Steve Boyd and Preachers, and it sort of expanded. The sound expanded beyond just the Celtic influence, and you know, bluegrass and country elements were coming in, blues, and it sort of morphed into this different kind of beast. And eventually that led me to meeting Kieran Tolhurst, who Alex Burns introduced me to, and he produced that third Steve Boyd and the Preachers album that, you know, got a lot of mileage, and we did really well for that. And that introduced us to the festival circuit and whatnot, and introduced me to a lot of key musical figures in my life.
You mentioned a couple of great people there, Kieran and Alex, and the Pogues, valet Shane McGowan, who was sad to hear of his passing this week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great man. Very, very sad indeed. Yeah. And I mean, you don't have people like Nick Cave calling you the greatest songwriter of your generation for nothing. That's pretty serious kudos.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you have got some out there influences. I mean, Tom Waits is a little bit out there, but I believe you're a bit of a fan of Captain Beefheart as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And that, again, was, you know, when I referenced some of the early punk stuff when I was a kid, and how that, especially with the Clash and London Calling, that caused me to start researching some of their influences. It was similar with Tom Waits, and I read an article, and he mentioned some obvious influences like Bob Dylan and whatnot, and some of the old early blues artists, but he mentioned Captain Beefheart. And I remember an older cousin of mine in Scotland used to have a couple of Captain Beefheart records. He had Trout Mask replica, I remember that. And same reason, I went and did some research, and I loved what I heard, and I could really make that Tom Waits connection, even though they're both very unique by the same token. You could certainly, you know, that more abstract, very original take on roots music that Captain Beefheart had, and some very unique lyrics and terminology and whatnot, even inventing some words and so on, arguably, you know, much like James Joyce did with Ulysses. So absolutely. I've never shied away from trying out any form, but you know, any genre of music. If it's got if it hits me here, that's all that matters to me. If it moves me in the right way. And you know, I can listen to Indian traditional music and feel that sometimes, all sorts of stuff. I can listen to Middle Eastern music. I can listen to Eastern European music, and especially the roots folk kind of forms. If you listen to the real stuff and not the the tacky versions thereof, you'll usually find something that's at the very least soulful and honest.
Agree. Now you've got another little side project that we've had at Way Out West a couple of times, the Caledonian Castaways. Tell
Ah,
us about that. That is a ripper.
so the Callies, as we affectionately refer to them, as well, that started out years ago. The whole idea of it, the concept, and it was almost half suggested in jest. But I remember saying to Alex Burns and Billy Abbott, I'm sure you know Billy's wonderful bands as well. And I suggested, hey, we're all expat Scots living in Australia, Scausies, and why don't we should come up with a band and come up with some tunes with a bit of a written through a Scottish lens and but still referencing Australia obviously, and came up with a few ideas here and there, and I think we may have had one rehearsal or something, then we put it to bed and other things got in the way for everyone. Then we came together again, Alex and I, with Billy, and we gained some kind of momentum then. We started doing some rehearsals and recruiting some other people and trying out rhythm section and whatnot. But that kind of drifted off as well. Other people were, what's like, life gets in the way. People have families, people have day jobs, people have other musical projects. And it was actually my wedding to my lovely wife was an outdoor affair, and we set up kind of a PA and mics and there's instruments and stuff like that. And I remember chatting to Stevie Montgomery, who you know very well, and explaining this project to him, and he was really interested. And I think a few months down the track or something, he ended up popping over my place. And Alex was there too. And we just played him some of the tunes we'd been working on just acoustically. I think Alex had a uke or something, and I just played acoustic guitar, and yeah, he loved them. He was right into it. So yeah, that's kind of where from there. Steve was like, yeah, I'm on board, and then we started getting some other people, and Stuart Ferguson, who occasionally plays in the Melbourne Ska Orchestra with Stevie and whatnot, was really keen, and we all agreed, hey, Tommy McEwen's a pretty obvious go-to for drums, and yeah, and here we are, and yeah, we've recorded an album which will be released soon, and we're feeling really enthused and excited about that. But that's been great fun because that draws from all sorts of musical influences, and it's fun, and there's some humor, arguably a bit more humor than everyone else's other projects, and it's just a nice place to work and create from as well, and that more light-hearted space. But also humor can be a powerful lyrical kind of tool as well. It doesn't have to all be slap and tickle and nudge when it can have depth. And there are some amazing writers like Tom Waits who understand how to channel that humor or that humorous energy lyrically, and take it someplace really meaningful.
Yeah, we hope we're going to do the Robbie Burns night again next year.
Fantastic.
That's a ripper, and I'm actually starting to like haggis. So, it's
I love
cool.
it. Yeah.
Although I must admit, I've grown up with that really strong Glasgow accent, and when we do the Robbie Burns address, I still don't know what the hell he's talking about when he does that.
It's a bit, but and some of that language that's like ancient, that's really old Scots dialect. And if you don't keep up with it, yeah, even if you're Scottish, you sometimes scratch your head a little bit. Now, every time I've gone back, or when I used to go back to Dundee, and some of my aunties and whatnot were still alive, especially my dad's eldest sister, she used to speak in a very old dialect, and not being used to it, used to take me a few days to get back into the mindset. Oh, right, and it started clicking again. But yeah, there's some very old and particular to their regions or cities and whatnot as well. And Dundee certainly has its own unique dialect. That's for sure.
I mentioned my ex-brother-in-law, Jimmy McFarland. He came over in the early 70s and brought a lot of music with him, but he did bring Billy Connolly with him. And I went to see Billy Connolly at Dallas Brooks Hall very early, probably his first tour. And I think I was the only Australian in that audience. I did not understand a word he said, but he was funny.
When was that, Rob? Was that in the 70s?
Yeah. It was way back. Way back. He played at Dallas Brooks Hall, but and I think he became more popular in Australia. And the second time I went to see him, I think he played more to the people that were non-Scottish as well. It was easier to understand. But I can still say the Wee Wayne's greeting. I know all about that stuff.
Well, he did. He had to tone down his accent a bit, even because I can still remember Billy Connolly albums in my household, and other like cousins and whatnot having some of those earlier live albums from the 70s. But when he started going on Parkinson and whatnot and doing well in England, I remember being in Scotland, you could pick up, his accent's changed. He was sounding a bit, toffee to us Scots. It was like, what the hell? But you can understand why, of course. He's going to broaden his horizons and broaden his audience, isn't he, by doing that?
Yeah, and when we talked about Scotland and the shipbuilding, I think he started as a shipbuilder, didn't he? And then he was more a musician than a comedian. I think he's at the Bumblebees.
The Humble Bums.
The Humble Bums, that's it.
He because back in those days, I guess that the shipyards in Glasgow was still quite a massive affair and something of an institution, and they had all sorts of different trades and whatnot that you can get into. I think he became a welder, memory serves. But the Humble Bums, and wasn't that with oh god, the name escaped me.
What's another famous music? Yeah.
The Scots, the other Glasgow, the guy who wrote Baker Street. What's his name again?
Yes. Gary. Was it Gary someone?
Oh, I can't believe I've forgotten.
It'll come back to us.
Yeah. Oh, Jerry Rafferty.
Jerry Rafferty, of course.
Jerry Rafferty, that's it. He was in the Humble Bums with Billy Connolly.
Yeah.
But I mean, legend rather, has it that people would start yelling more for his banter in between songs, and it would just stretch and stretch and stretch.
He tells one funny story because we talked before, you're Catholic and I'm Protestant, so Jimmy always called me a blue nose because I buried. So I once made the mistake of wearing a Rangers football jersey to Jimmy's dad's place, and that didn't go over too well.
Oh, Rob, I can only just imagine.
So
Huns shirt.
Yeah.
To Celtic. family. Yeah.
Before we get into talking about our gig, I believe, and I don't know if you still do, but you work for Vin Centre Victoria for quite some time. Do you still
I
do
did.
some work with them? Or?
Not anymore. I used to work for Vincent Care,
Oh, Vincent
which
Care.
was a name change. It's St. Vincent de Paul, basically,
Yeah.
who people would be more familiar with, or certainly more familiar with that name. And that was just the renaming of the social services. So mental health support, homelessness support, youth, families, and so on and so forth. Yeah, for many years, but I'm still in the same sector. I just work for a different organization. I work for the Salvos now.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. I've jumped ship from from the Catholic organization into the Proddies.
Yeah.
Wonders shall never cease.
But that must have sort of changed you as a person, seeing those people, those,
Yeah.
all the mental health and the drug addictions and the alcohol addictions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just well, all those, it's as they say, intersectional needs. There aren't too many people experiencing homelessness who aren't struggling with other issues. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they're completely, hey, I'm fine, I just haven't got anywhere to sleep. There's generally mental health, there's generally some sort of trauma, there's generally, addiction, and on it goes, family violence. So yes, I mean, the interesting thing is with Vincent Care, I for quite a few years, I still can't believe I managed to get into this gig, but I was given a role where I developed and facilitated music and songwriting therapy groups for the homeless and marginalized. And that was a whole new take on music and creativity for me. It was very different. But I'm really happy I did it. However, it did cause me to pretty much stop my own music for quite a number of years because it used up so much energy, and I was just exhausted. It was like I had no creative energy left. But I'm glad I did it because it's a very selfless pursuit, and it's just a nice angle to come at music from, and to use it, I suppose, as a therapeutic tool, and to use it as a connecting, bonding tool, and just something that can give people a sense of hope and a sense of achievement and lots of things. So yeah, that taught me a lot, and I think over time it probably expanded my probably complemented or enhanced my ability as a writer, I think, to broaden my horizons and made me consider different subject matter, different topics, different sorts of characters, and that ended up being a good little journey for me, I think. And hopefully it's added to and complemented my own creative journey as a writer, I guess.
Well done, mate. That's it must be tough work. Now we've got Steve Boyd's Rum Reverie at the club for our Christmas breakup, 17th of December. That band started, I believe, in the mid 2010s. Is there a difference between the Steve Boyd and Preachers and Rum Reverie? What can we expect on the day?
Absolutely. I mean, the main difference would be quite a number of years. But look, I think technically we formed probably around 2015, actually, Rob. And then released our mini album or EP, Healers and Howlers, 2016. But that's a very different. I mean, initially it was probably a bit more raw, than what it's kind of morphed into. When I say raw, it was very immediate. It was a smaller lineup. Initially, it was just Paul on drums and myself singing and playing guitar, and that's what we were going to do. And then we were like, "Oh, love to have a bit of stand-up bass." And we rehearsed as a trio for ages, but then I was like, "No, we just need something else." And we got in some sax, and yeah, it kind of moved from there really. With Healers and Howlers, it's still primarily that lineup. So it's drums, stand-up bass, just me on guitar, electric guitar, vocals, and saxophone or trombone. We didn't have a brass section as such. And yeah, from there, it was just too exciting playing with brass. So we had to expand it to at least 2, sometimes 3. And became more like a review, I suppose, and started, we started bringing on board all the influences that we've gathered over the years, and all the influences that are kind of pretty much in our DNA as musicians these days. It was inevitable. It's not as, I think, with Steve Boyd and the Preachers, that, how it originated from a folky sort of affair, and then morphed more into a country soul / gospel blues kind of arrangement, I guess. This is coming more from a bluesy, raw, early bluesy kind of, even, a little bit of punky, jazz noir kind of place, I guess. At its core, I think that's where it comes from, but it's morphed into a bit of a gospel soul kind of review as well. So I just call it roots music to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think any of those musical forms like R&B, rockabilly, blues, soul, they wouldn't exist without, field haulers and gospel music anyway. It all came from there as far as I'm concerned. Certainly Afro-American musical forms. So to me, roots is a really convenient title. It just, it covers all those genres. They all come from the same place, I think.
I agree. That's why we called ourselves Way Out West Roots Music Club, because it's all encompassing.
Absolutely.
And I really liked it when I was reading about it, and it said you've got some New Orleans swagger. You turned me on straight away there with the New Orleans.
Yeah. Hey, look, I'm a huge New Orleans music fan. And again, New Orleans is very much that hodgepodge. It's that gumbo. It's that mix, and they kind of proudly, wear their many influences on the musical, sleeves, don't they?
Okay.
Heart on the musical hearts on the sleeve, and it's all about variety. And oh yeah, some French influences, bring it on. Some country, sure, some soul, some blues, even some Latin, and they've created this really unique sound as a result, I think. So yeah, give me some of that, is what I thought when I first started digging into that musical space.
Spot on. And we've also, we talked about Alex Burns before, but Alex Burns will be opening the show for us as well.
He will, yeah. Obviously, Alex has been a musical comrade, collaborator, and very dear friend for many years now. So yeah, we're quite honored to have him agree to open up for us, and no doubt Alex will get up and have a wee play and sing with us during our set as well, I dare say.
Thanks, Steve. We're so much looking forward to it. So for everyone listening in, it's Sunday the 17th of December, 2 till 5. Seeing it's Christmas, we might go overtime too.
That sounds like fun.
Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat. It's been really enjoyable, and we'll see you soon, mate. All the best.
Likewise. My pleasure, Rob. I look forward to seeing you soon, pal.